Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very first edition of our discussion series, Our Common Future. Yes, you hear it correctly. We want to talk about our future. Not because we want to run away from the present, but because the present in which we are in Cameroon today, leads naturally to a conclusion that a new day is coming. Remember, someone used to say that as long as the night can be, as dark as the night can be, a new day always comes. We are starting the conversation because we are hopeful and we have faith that the new day is coming, and it may be coming very soon. And when the new day comes, will we be ready and know what to do? Do we know which direction we may take the country? Or are we just accepting the risk of being taken by surprise? The new day may come as a thief in the middle of the night. Will you be awake? I'm not sure. My name is Claude Cheta, and I'm very delighted. It is my pleasure to introduce this series of conversation, this discussion, and to help us understand the present and set our priority for the future, for the new foundation for Cameroon. We have three panelists, all from the UK. It is my pleasure to introduce to you my colleague, Yves Chudi. Yves, you are welcome to the program.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much, Claude. Yes, my name is Yves Trudy. I'm a UK citizen. I live in and around London. Thank you to invite me to this wonderful program. I believe this is where we're probably going to start another line of discussions with friends, Cameroonians residing in the UK and Ireland. Certainly, it's a wonderful opportunity for us to come together to discuss and start really thinking of how we're going to move our country forward. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Yves, and you are most very welcome. We also have Jean-Michel Gona. Welcome to the program, Jean-Michel. And we are very delighted to have you here today with us. Jean-Michel?
Hi, Claude. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the invite here. It's a pleasure for me to be here. As you well said, we have to wake up from the dream and start acting to realize it. It's my pleasure to be here today. And my name is Jean-Michel Gona. I am an engineer and entrepreneur all the way from the UK and over to shout into the world.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. We also have Fulbert Tene. Welcome to the program, Fulbert. We are delighted to have you too.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claude. It's also a privilege and an honor for me to be part of this discussion. It's really an important part of our citizen duty to be thinking about Cameroon and what can be done. In fact, what is the situation and what can be done? So, as you said, I'm Fulbert Tene. I'm a secondary teacher in the UK here. I live around Leicester. Thank you. Over to you, Claude.
Thank you very much and welcome to Yves, to Jean-Michel, and to Fulbert. My first question to you tonight, we are going to be talking Cameroon from all angles. If you're a doctor looking at Cameroon and the patient is called Cameroon, how will you describe the situation of the patient? And what do you think is the main problem, the main disease that the patient is suffering from? I would like to start with you, Yves. What do you think? What is your understanding, your analysis of the critical situation that Cameroon is finding itself on?
Yes, thank you again, Claude. It's wonderful, for us to really to start at the start. If you just allow me to say it that way. Absolutely. Before we start analyzing what may be the remedies, what kind of treatment we need to administer to the very sick patient that we all know to be Cameroon these days. Yes, absolutely. We always should start by looking at what seems to be the diagnosis. of that very patient. We all know the situation our country finds itself today. Yes, on paper, we call ourselves a democracy. But when you look closely at the institutions which should allow a proper democracy to function, you can't but really ask those very, very serious questions in terms of does Cameroon, as it is currently, work as a democracy? Do we have clearly separation of the three main powers, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, those three forces that should work in conjunction to allow for democracy, for liberty, for freedom to actually be what citizens actually aspire and experience on a daily life? Is it really what we're seeing in Cameroon? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. I'm not going to go in detail in terms of what we see at the much granular level, but at those very, very high strategic level, that's what you would imagine to see in other proper democracies. Is Cameroon really a democracy? My answer would be not quite so. Far from it. I think at each of those three levels, be it judiciary, be it the legislature, or even the executive, the functions, the way the country runs, vital services, really, you question whether really it's working the way it should. And from that perspective, I think at very, very much, at the upper level, I think there's so much irrationality. There's so much that does not fit in the way you would expect it to work. I'll take the case of the UK, where you would expect the legislature, be it the high or the lower chamber, to really be responsible in terms of ensuring that proper acts actually come through that system to allow for the country to be governed properly, and for those to be able to hold the government to account in terms of its running of the country. Is it the situation in Cameroon? The answer is no. I'm not quite sure what we do at the parliament level or at the level of the Senate. And it's so difficult to understand why, if you just consider most recently what happened in terms of latest budgetary law, whether there was any proper discussion in terms of allowing for those to be reviewed before actually being passed on. And I don't think that's what we saw. And so it's difficult to understand how a country would ever be able to function if the legislature is actually not holding the executive to account. That on its own is a real problem. If we move from there to look at the judiciary in terms of the latest event, the headlines that we know in relation to the tragic killing, should I say assassination, of journalist Martinez Zogo, to the point that we cannot see any of the most senior responsible institutions within the Republic to take hold of the situation and to open a proper investigation into that assassination, to the point that the President of the Republic had to institute that very investigation. It calls to belief. It really questions us, and it questions the integrity of the system in being able to manage itself properly. So clearly, Cameroon is a very sick patient. I'm sure we'll probably move on to discuss a little bit more. So what are the main things we need to start doing in terms of ensuring that we can administer, at least we can think of the right treatment to start administering to the very sick patient of Cameroon?
Thank you very much, Yves. I hear from you lack of democracy, lack of accountability, lack of integrity. What about you, Jean-Michel? What do you think the patient is suffering from? What is the problem of Cameroon today?
Your mic, I believe you probably need to open your mic.
Thank you so much, Claude, for the question, and just hats off to Yves for the points that he actually lifted there in relation to the balance of powers. So I'm just going to leave that on the side in my own intervention. I will look on the positive side to start with. I think Cameroon is a formidable country who's produced extraordinary people who are doing wonders around the world. Unfortunately, this country, I think, is suffering from very serious illnesses within itself. I think there is a problem of cultural identity. It's extremely important to understand that Cameroon is struggling with the cultural identity. There is an endemic corruption that is deeply rooted into the country. Not just me saying. You have to look into international reports. And critically, and what really hits a lot of people is poverty. I think on that front, we as the diaspora really suffer from it because we bear the brunt of challenges when it comes to supporting family locally. And I personally believe it shouldn't be the way with all the riches that the country harbors. So we should be able to satisfy every single citizen within the country. And when I think about the war raging in the country right now, we wouldn't call it a special operation. This is a deep issue that's happening. It mixes a bit with cultural identity, but it's important to understand. And finally, I would say the diaspora is okay because, as I mentioned to start with, most are doing wonders in their place of living. But it is important to say that locally in Cameroon, it is not what we should say. I think we are basically the one of the places where this civilization started. We're talking maybe 200,000 years ago. That's where humanity started to move across the world. So it makes sense that we really make a stop and say Cameroon is suffering, and the solution may be coming from the diaspora. Thank you, Claude.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. Yves said lack of democracy, you say deep cultural identity crisis. That's very interesting, and diaspora can be a solution. What about you, Fulbert? What do you think is the biggest problem of Cameroon?
Okay, thank you very much, Claude. Thanks to Yves and Jean-Michel. The biggest problem, to be fair, I think everything is a problem, really. So it's really difficult to find out which one is the biggest. I'll take to my account some of what both Yves and Jean-Michel said or have already said. So initially, I was thinking of the political, the infrastructure, the poverty, all those things. Yes, of course. But I will tend to focus more on the political side, because if the political side is sorted, everything else should be following. So I'm going to look at, still on the political side, if the Cameroonian people were able to actually take advantage of, or if democracy was existing in Cameroon, therefore the infrastructure, the poverty, and all the rest will be sorted, because the people will know that what they get is not a favor. What they get from the state is actually what they due. And therefore, with transparent election, they'll be able to hold politicians to account and say, okay, last time you came to us and said, this was the plan for you, but we haven't seen any of that. But what is going on is, because there isn't that transparency, people can do what they want, and the Cameroonian people will not get anything. Therefore, it's great to point out the economic problem, the cultural problem, and all those. But the Cameroonian as a patient is a critically sick patient. So we need to look at what will probably trigger all the rest, until or unless we have a clear political system in place that value its citizen with, let's say, as somebody said, love, we're probably not going to see what we want. So if we had rulers who had in mind, at the heart of everything they do, the Cameroonian people, most of our problem will be sorted. Because if those in power, they knew that they were accountable to the people, I don't think things will be happening the way they're happening. So if you look at corruption, for example, corruption can go on as much as possible. No one is actually taking, how should I say, no one is taking responsibility of saying this is going to finish. Whereas the political system, who has the Cameroonian people at mind, will make it a priority. And whenever there is a political will, there will be action. Action cannot happen without political will. And at the moment, I think that is something we're missing enormously, and something that is keeping us exactly where we are. So critical patient Cameroon, sick of pretty much everything, but it's probably a matter of prioritizing where do we start, as I think you said yourself or imply yourself, Claude, at the beginning. So for the first, my first intervention, I think I would tend to agree with what everybody has said so far. But again, I'll probably emphasize more on the political side, because if the political will is there, that's what is going to transform everything else, the economic, the cultural, that's going to lead every single change that we want. If you have the best economy without the political system and the political will in place, it's going to collapse. I don't think that we are where we are because there is a lack of resources. No, Cameroon is a rich country, very rich actually. So we don't deserve to be where we are. And that's probably where we need to work out first. That would be my first intervention, Claude. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Fulbert, for emphasizing on the political will that will probably trigger every other changes. Yves mentioned democracy. Jean-Michel mentioned cultural identity, cultural crisis. I want to challenge you with one biggest issue I believe could be also be the problem. The trust between Cameroonian and their political institutions or even their political leaders. There has been a breach of trust. So even whatever they do today, we don't trust them. There has been an assassination. There is a judicial process. Do I trust the system to deliver justice? I'm not sure. There might be election tomorrow or today. Do I trust them to deliver fair election? No. There may be new economic policy. There may be new intention to change the education system. Do I trust them? I think one critical problem in Cameroon is we have lost trust in our current political system and even political leaders to deliver change that we expect. That's a problem of trust between Cameroonian and their political system. But also there is a problem between Cameroonian themselves, what we used to call vivre ensemble, living together. I think people have been mounted one against the other. It has been difficult for the Cameroonian to speak in one unified voice, to be able to claim or to exercise their right. So there is a relationship problem between Cameroonian and their leadership and their system and their country, and problem between Cameroonian themselves. Somebody used to say, you only have the leaders that you deserve. Because if somebody has been there for 40 years, it's because you have let him there. So there must be a change to happen somewhere. So my question is, based on your analysis and based on our understanding of the breach of trust, what do you think needs to change urgently to bring change to Cameroon? Let me start with Fulbert. What do you think needs to change urgently if you want to bring change to Cameroon?
I mean, yeah, you're 100% right that trust has gone, and it has not gone overnight, really. So we have to be aware that trust has taken time to go, and people have been disappointed with a lot of things, really. If you're going to be doing the history of that lack of trust, it might go back many years back. But looking forward, I think probably the first thing to do will be to have a real dialogue between Cameroonians. Cameroonians need to sit and talk together, not Cameroonians sit and listening to some people. Cameroonians need to sit and talk together, talk among themselves. That's probably a fair, a frank dialogue between all Cameroonians. They need to sit there. We have not done that, and there are many issues that have led to that lack of trust or loss of trust. So it cannot just be kept under the carpet. People have to be able to say, these are the things that have gone wrong so far or over years, and until those issues are resolved with honesty, I think it will be very, very difficult to get that trust back. People have to sit together. I think, like even in interpersonal relationship, when there's a lack of trust, you have to sit together and see what are the issues and deciding together what is the way forward. That should be a priority for Cameroon to do now. Sit together. What are the issues? What are the issues? And it has to be an honest and frank one. It doesn't have to be one where only the issues that make us happy are raised. No, everything that is a problem should be raised. Once those issues are raised, that's the way forward. If people are honest, again, I'm sticking to the honesty because trust has been lost, and really, it will need honesty. So these are the way forward, and those way forward should be accepted and honestly, frankly accepted by everybody. And if people say that they're leading towards what they have decided, I mean, all Cameroonians from all the boards accepting that, okay, this is the way forward, and we're going to do everything to follow the steps that we have agreed together, that should be, according to me, one of the things that could lead to rebuilding that trust. Otherwise, it'll be difficult. Let's not be pessimistic, but it will be difficult without that trust. Probably impossible, actually, because I cannot see how the issues around now could be resolved by just ignoring them under the carpet. We've got some examples in the countries of issues that have not been discussed properly, and issues that have been going on for years that have come back to probably to haunt us now. So I think honest dialogue of Cameroonians sitting together, knowing that we are all stakeholders of that country. The country belongs to all of us, and whatever we want is for the good of that country. If for the good of that country, so we should be able to talk to one another in order to solve the lack of trust that has happened. That's probably where I see the urgency now, Claude.
Lack of trust and a real dialogue. This is where we should start. What about you, Jean-Michel? What should be done urgently to put our country on the right direction? Jean-Michel?
Yes, I think that becomes a serious matter when a patient is driven into accidents and emergencies. I'm not pretending that Cameroon is riding into accidents and emergencies, because I said earlier, we have a formidable diaspora who is doing wonders somewhere else. So we have a big baobab that is suffering at this moment in time. So if the baobab doctor is turning up, the baobab is there, and we need to revive and make sure it produces fantastic fruits like it used to do. So at this moment in time, we know there is a problem. What shall we do? I can only think of our country, Cameroon, being in a state of hypnosis right now. And I mean by that population are actually a little bit in zombification mode. It could be a mild zombification, but for sure they are deep asleep. And I'm not sure people are acting for the good of the local population. I mentioned endemic corruption earlier and many other challenges that they are facing. So I think they need to unplug themselves from the drug that they're being fed, whatever that is. And really, we need to identify who is administering this drug and unplug it. And it will only happen from those who are maybe half awake or fully awake among us. So it's extremely important to identify that. Now, if we need to be more practical, as far as I understand, it is a presidential democracy. So sometimes it's good to refresh a little bit. If we're talking about ideas, when I looked into some documents that are written there, quite good ideas, but they're just not implemented. So I'm taking at some point some people who maybe were very responsible at some point have turned either corrupted or maybe they're tired of doing what they meant to do. And some refreshing needs to happen as soon as possible. I'm talking about refreshing in a political sense, talking about refreshing the system in maybe the way things are monitored, done. This is why people are talking about election rules that needs to change properly. We're talking about bringing some refreshing the way we do things. It is a welcoming country, Cameroon. As I said, we are at the cradle, part of the cradle of this humanity, and people are welcoming going to Cameroon. The economy of the country is in the hands of so many people coming from various horizons, and they're always welcomed to be there. And it is a challenge to realize that the local law does not welcome its own children when they are willing to come in and bring a different perspective or bring an improvement. So if something has to be done immediately, it will be to unplug oneself from the toxin that's being administered, whatever toxin it is. You can imagine them. We're talking about a free-flowing beer or any other drugs that people administer themselves. We're talking about giving more priority to items like football or maybe music, in intoxication of all sorts, including misinformation. We're talking about, the list is long. So we need to really maybe refreshing the system in a way it has been written, identify who is putting the foot on the brake, and make that change. And I take it at some point, it may come from a new governing body altogether.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. We have talked about new refreshment, new government body, about dialogue. Eve, what do you think needs to change urgently for the patient Cameroon?
Yeah, thank you again, Claude. And just before I answer this very question, I just want to touch back on what I said initially, just going back to if Cameroon is seen as a very ill patient, what disease could we equate that to? And I first want us to really have an understanding as to where do we see Cameroon? Does it suffer from a form of incurable cancer, which we know will slowly, end in a death? Probably not. I really won't say that, because Cameroon is certainly very, very ill. And it's not just an illness which is in a state where we think we could just administer or try to sort of sort out the symptoms to try and cure it. And that's the kind of situation. It's kind of a systemic situation. It's an illness which is sort of attack various systems in the body of the country. We can, try and see it from that analogy. And that being the case, and that's why I implied the principle of having a clear separation of power right at the beginning to allow for things to run the way they should naturally. And why I envisage that as probably the best option is because, as in, my area of practice, my area of specialism, I'm a HR consultant, and part of what I do in terms of my work is assessing and diagnosing the stage of the illness, not the illness, the state of difficulty within a system. If I'm looking at a company or an organization, the first thing I would do is to try and audit the situation the company finds itself in terms of its HR. And that allows me to first look at what do we need to administer in terms of ensuring that the system has, or the organization has, the clear infrastructure it needs to have in order to be able to operate. So from that perspective, Cameroon is a critically ill patient with a disease which is systemic, which has affected many parts of its body. Can we cure Cameroon by just administering something which would cure the head, but not look at the rest of the organs which are also being affected? So if we take the example, I can't remember which of our panelists took earlier, whether it was Jean-Michel, in terms of we can rebuild that trust with the diaspora. Would that be enough? And my temptation is to say, I don't think that would be enough, because we need to go back at the root cause of why does that distrust settle in the first place? And it's because if time after time you've tried to get someone involved in something that you are driving, and time after time you've disappointed them, but that's what creates that frustration that leads to that mistrust. If then you've tried to bring them in and your attempt has not been genuine in the sense of what you were really trying to do, and I'd go back to the crisis. We all know the Northwest and Southwest crisis in Cameroon, what has now become a war. And we all know the attempt to try and repair it by fixing up this so-called dialogue. Did they actually bring trust? Did they actually bring any form of addressing the current crisis? No. So before we get to that position of trying to fix the trust or the relationship issue, we need to go back to the fundamentals. If we do not, by principle, ensure the system, by principle, ensure that there is clear separation of power, whereby the judiciary can have the means to impose upon the executive to do what it's supposed to be doing. Obviously the role of the government and the role of the president, we are in a semi-presidential system, obviously it's to define the vision of the government, should I say the country, and then allow its government to implement it. But the legislature has that duty to ensure that it monitors what the executive is doing. And if it's not playing its role, then obviously the executive would do whatever they want to do. And we just continue to, we've named some of the implication in terms of lack of accountability. But who should be ensuring that there is accountability? But obviously that's the legislature. And if they're not ensuring that there is accountability, well, then the executive will continue to do what they're doing. And that is the situation Cameroon found itself in. So I'm just going to go back again just to insist why it's so important for us to ensure that those things are there. So rather than focusing on, could we then maybe say, if we change the head of the system without really ensuring that those institutions, those principles are within our constitution and they're well separated to allow for each of those powers to play fully their role, without allow the country to fix itself and get back to, working as it normally as it should. That's the biggest question. And that thing that alone would allow for that to happen. So I think we would certainly need to now start thinking, do we really sit down? Yes, I would totally agree. You've mentioned having a proper consensual dialogue, including, most Cameroonians, most political powers that actually have a say in the current life of Cameroon. I think only through that process, a consensual, proper dialogue would allow us all together to agree some of those key principles if we are going to be left with a country, because the country needs rebuilding, that's no question. And in order to do that, we really now need, and I think the government should be brave enough to start engaging that true dialogue, not what we had in 2019. I think we need a true dialogue to see, and that would include looking at the form of the state, because that could actually be the biggest problem. Because having this unitary centralized system where they could keep talking about being decentralized, but that's not what we're seeing in practice. The system is extremely centralized. And so we now need to sit down, agree what we would expect to be the key principles to drive this country forward. We need to start rethinking the form of the state and agree now a clear division between those powers so that the executive knows exactly what it's doing. The legislature is following and ensuring that they're checking and going through those check and balances in terms of what's happening with the executive, and clearly the judiciary is ensuring that they could actually take the executive, to task if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, including members of government. And in the current system, that is not happening. So we can talk about any other aspects of getting the diaspora involved and all sorts. Yes, but after all, even if the diaspora gets involved and we found ourselves in that very system, which is totally disrupted, I wouldn't say disrupted, but totally confused in terms of what it's meant to be doing, then I don't think we get to that very goal. So clearly, as I said before, we need a proper discussion among ourselves to agree what are the key principles to govern our country, and certainly a new form of state, if that be the case, and that would probably be what would allow us to start working towards getting the country back where it should be.
Thank you very much. I think this is very fantastic contribution, and from Philbert to Jean-Michel. I want to summarize by saying that what needs to change, I've seen 3 levels of change. Individual change. We need to start individually, first by believing that change is possible in Cameroon and we have a part to play. As diaspora, the stone that the builder rejected and said useless is going to be the cornerstone that is going to be the foundation for a new Cameroon. You, me, Philbert, Jean-Michel, Yves, we are the change that Cameroon is waiting. If we know that we can do something and act on our belief, have your card, go be ready to vote, influence my brothers, my sister in Cameroon, and that will have a ripple effect. If all Cameroonians strongly believe that today, Cameroon of 2023 is very different from Cameroon of 2018 or 2015, 2010, and that we have our future into our own hand, that is the first starting point. If individually we can change, the second level of change will be to bring the leader that is trusted, a leader that has integrity, a leader that has a vision. Because we can have a good leader, but elections will never be won unless individually, unless collectively, we take him there. And with a leader that is trusted, we can trigger all other changes that the country desperately needs. We need a change in our political institutions. We need a change in our cultural setup to look after the cultural identity crisis. We need a change in our economic system, a change in education, in health. Everything else is changed when we have the right leader, the right institution, and the right cultural mindset. That is where Cameroon is going to change. But it starts at individual level, then leadership, and then all the other institutions. From that point, we can have and we can expect a better Cameroon today. That leads to my next point. How do we bring that change in Cameroon? Let's say we have a new government. Where do we start? What should be the priority? And that is the key, the heart of our discussion. what will be the first action that you would recommend to the new government, a new regime? That means you clean up the current leadership, they are gone. And you are there now, and you have to set the priority for the future. What will be, let's say, your top 3 priority? Only 3. I want to start with Jean-Michel. You are there in A2D, and you have to make big decisions. What will be your next priority to rebuild Cameroon?
Thank you, Claude, for coming back to me. I would say that is a critical and very important matter. Me being president of the republic, that it's not me. Okay, I understand that.
Let's say you have to contribute to shaping the policy and the strategy. You are in a think tank shaping the future. What will be the direction, the strategic direction?
Absolutely. As we always see in those situations, if there is a critical emergency, the system has been changed. Basically, it's a matter of saying, to start with, you got to evaluate and know exactly what is going on at this moment in time. Because to be fair with you, I'm not sure a lot of people know what's going on. It's a matter of doing the analysis of the environment to really identify where the pain points are. It's extremely to understand that basically people are suffering on the ground. So some sort of hope has to be given to the people, to the Cameroonian people, whether they are in the country or outside of the country. There needs to be a new signal. This is why I agree with so many panelists, the fact that there has to be clarity onto people's power and onto executives' powers. So we need to know exactly where some powers start and where they stop. It will be critical to literally ensure that how will I say it? To ensure that people get out of their dreams right now and they start acting to help in whatever specialties they are. So excellence, mediocrity has to get out of the window, because literally right now there is an exodus of skills from Cameroon outside of Cameroon. It is something that needs to stop in a way. We are importing people who are coming in to do a job that could have been done by people who have been trained locally. So I'll probably say urgently, we need to delimit the powers, make sure that we know exactly who is doing what and which powers they're in. We will need to make sure that the population have a clear plan. What do they do within what happens in the next 5 years, next 10 years? And someone will say, yes, there is a current plan right now, but it's not being put into operation. What we hear is embezzlement after embezzlement after embezzlement. It has to be clear and implemented. So that's probably what I will suggest as urgent action right now. Stop the bleeding of the skills going out, reassure the population, clarify the limits of each set of powers, and then go to work.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. Now I want to turn to Yves. You have the task to set the priority for Cameroon for the coming years. What will be those priorities?
Yeah, thank you again, Claude. Yeah, I think, as I said before, it goes back to, I've looked at the patient. I've diagnosed its symptoms. I kind of know where the patient is in terms of its disease. I then need to look at the best form of treatment. For me, the very first thing to start looking at is to stop the bleeding. As just picking from where Jean-Michel left. Yes, we will need to stop the bleeding. But how we go about stopping the bleeding, as I said before, clear separation of those 3 powers is instrumental. So we would first need to ensure that there is clear accountability. And the best way of controlling that accountability, first thing quickly, is to ensure that the judiciary is able to do what it's meant to be doing. Because in any system, wherever there are clear mechanisms of control of governance, that system will run better. So I think that's the very first key thing we need to put in place. I will ensure, first of all, that the judiciary has the power it should possess to be able to to be able to monitor and ensure that we stop the rot. People have to be accountable, otherwise they would face the justice. So that'd be the very first thing to ensure it's put in place. Second key thing we will need to do, as I've said before, we will need to ensure that we look at the infrastructure of the country and we agree those set of principles upon which the country will now function. Clearly, that would mean a number of things. It would be a clear vision. That would mean a clear vision for the country. And I mean, if you are in the government and you're thinking a clear vision from the government, then there needs to be clear orientation in terms of what that would mean for each of the ministry, in terms of what is. So if the country is setting itself to, let's say, we focus on ensuring that we stop, the flow of talent outside. What does that mean for the system? It means the education system will need to reconsider. Well, let's probably start by the industry. We need to start reconsider what are the key areas where we desperately need kids to get into, and what would the implication be in terms of those priorities. So that's where it starts. And then we work from there all the way to all the other sectors of the economy, and then right through to the education, because clearly we have an education system which kind of takes kids through and ensure that they get the skills and the qualifications required to be able to get into employment. So we will need to reform all of those sectors, set those priorities, but make sure those priorities are aligned with central government priorities. And that's only through that mechanism that we'll now, with time, look at the third aspect, which is trying now to ensure that there is clarity and there are clear accountability in terms of what people are doing. And hopefully, once we have all those three things in place, we would start functioning as a proper democracy. And it's only from that perspective, and as I said before, obviously there would be many other things that would certainly be included in all that scenario. But I'm only saying it because I believe not until you have those priorities set at the top that you can allow for other things to run. Obviously, there are a lot of other things that we can add to this scenario, but those would be the three key things that I would start thinking about.
Thank you very much, Yves. What about you, Fulbert? Where will you start?
Where will I start? In fact, it's good that all of you have spoken before me, so it means that I could take to my credit some of what you've said. So I'll start with what you've said, Claude, early on. So that's assuming that a leader with a clear vision is in place, because that's essential. You need a leader that has a vision of where they want the country to be, and that can then take people with him to lead the rest of the nation where they have seen us already. That somebody without the vision wouldn't see. So that's assuming that that's the case. My first point, you might not be surprised, would be education. Education. Why? Because I think that Cameroonians are great, as Jean-Michel has already said. So no one can deny that. So I think it might even be easier if from the top, the young Cameroonian that is wanted for that new Cameroon is defined, then an education system that will take them through should be designed, and I'm sure they will follow through. Cameroonians are so intelligent. They are so, hardworking. So with all that into consideration, I'm sure that shouldn't be a problem. I think the problem is not the student or the educator. The problem is those at the top, those making the decision to design a system that will make the Cameroonian of tomorrow, the Cameroonian that will lead us to that will help us to get away from the illnesses we've said early on. That education system should promote excellency, and we know we can do that. Excellency, not just to have like the top grade in Cameroon, but excellency to be able to compete with young people around the world. I'm probably not even going to say only young people, because in another way, it could even be adult education as well, because in terms of knowing that knowing our rights as citizens, that's probably not just young people. And I would still something that is taught here in the UK, which is British values. Why not have something like Cameroonian values taught in school, so that when young people grow up or go through the education system, by the end of it, they know what it means to be Cameroonian. They know what are their rights, what are their expectations, what are their rights really, what are not just the right, but also their duty. So that will make Cameroonian who are able to, if I take to my account what Yves said earlier as well, who can be able to hold those in power accountable. I've gone through the education system. I know what Cameroonian values are. Therefore, I expect from you that the judiciary should be independent and should be able to work independently, for example. So excellency, and that they should be able to compete with other young people around the world. Jean-Michel mentioned the fact that we were losing talent. Yes, of course, we're losing talent, but our education system should be that continue to make us more competitive, that make us able to compete even across the world. We're not just the education system will not just be for creating the Cameroonian that would work in Cameroon. If we consider the world to be that big village, the Cameroonians should be able to compete with people around the world, as they're already doing anyway. The Cameroonian, the education system should be one that promotes critical thinking, really. So it shouldn't be just the young people who accept everything that they're given. They should be able to question the why. Why do we do this? Why is this necessary? Moving away from the education system, I think the standard of living should be the next step, really. Because I think when you go through our Cameroon, you can see that the standard of living in some places the standard of living is not what it should be. And I don't think it's really a complete revolution that is needed there. I think it's an equal distribution of income. An equal distribution of income will be a starting point, really, to improve that standard of living for Cameroonians. And the final one from me will be the level of infrastructure. I think that the level of infrastructure in our country is at a level where really something needs to be done. And when I look at the level of infrastructure, I think it could be like what brings other things into, how should I say, into place, really. So if you had good infrastructure, let's just think of roads and maybe the railway. That will allow goods to move easily from the north to the south, east to west, which will make life slightly easier, and even those farmers to be able to have like a good income from what they're producing. If they're producing good, that will end up being perished because there are no road infrastructure. I think that is really something that has to be considered. So that will be my three main priorities. Of course, what others have said will be important as well. I think with the situation of Cameroon, three priorities are probably not like, how should I say, not difficult to find. It's easy to find more than three priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I fully agree with you. There is only one thing that I would like to add. If there was a new president in Cameroon today, I will tell him two things. First is that you cannot change a society just with decree. If you take a text, if nobody is buying into that text, nothing will never change. The second thing, my grandfather used to tell me, if you want to travel very fast, travel alone. If you want to go very far, let's travel together. This is why it's very important to travel together, the inclusive aspect of Cameroon, of our society. We have talked about Cameroon of tomorrow. It's Cameroon of all of us. We have had many problems with our brothers who do not agree maybe with many things. We need to have a very inclusive dialogue so that we move together and we set together the direction for the future. We have problem with Cameroonians from other part of the country, those who have suffered from the current system, and those who actually are the perpetrator of the suffering. There should be some kind of peace and reconciliation, because even that Cameroon will include those you are fighting today. But we will need them. We need to agree, and somebody to say sorry, and somebody to say, despite all the wrongdoing, I forgive you, and we move together. I think there should be some kind of rebuilding trust between Cameroonian and their leadership, and mending the broken relationship between Cameroonians themselves. That is very critical for rebuilding a new country. Rebuilding that relationship, broken relationship, and broken trust between Cameroonian and their leadership. If you have a new leader, I think that will be a good point to start. And from there, having a dialogue and then deciding rebuilding education, infrastructure, health, whatever, with the assumption that we are moving together and we are having an agreed agenda. This is how we can rebuild Cameroon. And this is where we can start by having a conversation, having a debate like this. So this kind of debate should definitely continue. So to move forward, what should be your concluding remark and the role of the diaspora in bringing this change? Let's start with Jean-Michel. Concluding remark, and what do you see, 30 seconds, the role of the diaspora in bringing this change?
Yeah, thanks for the honor once again. I will simply say the future of Cameroon depends on Cameroonian. Whoever has ever been Cameroonian, in my eyes, has a part to play in the future of Cameroon. It starts from outside in, because those outside have got a different view of what the Cameroon could be in 10, 20, 30 years. But particularly from the inside out as well, after the injection of the outside contribution, simply because they know local realities. And their problems can only be expressed better by those inside. So on that sense, the priority is really that. Working together, satisfying, getting one bound, whether you are French speaking or English speaking, it's crucial to get those together as one single unit, and then get inspired by the outside and shine brightly, because the inside will be inspired. So that will be my closing conclusion. So let's be brothers and sisters, and let's help build Cameroon. Let us help build this planet like most of us are doing outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. And then Philbert, your concluding remark very quickly before we close.
Okay, yeah, thank you again, Claude. So really, following on what Jean-Michel said, I think the diaspora should lead by example. The diaspora should take an active part in what is going on in Cameroon. The diaspora should make sure that it has its word, it has a say in what is going on in Cameroon. That's probably what I can say to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And your concluding point, Yves, how do we bring that change, and what can the diaspora do?
Yes, again, this is an initiative that we are driving, and it's fantastic that we're starting these conversations. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us, first for the diaspora, to talk among ourselves, to speak from one voice, from one hymn sheet, as it were. I think what we need probably to do is to use this platform to invite our brothers and sisters back home, those in position of power, because clearly we're not just talking among ourselves, but we're also talking to our brothers and sisters back home, especially those in, as I mentioned before, position of power. We're talking here to our governors, to those who are ruling our country right now, to say we are that diaspora. We have waited for a long time to, for you to reach out to us, whether that's been done somehow, but we've not failed at. So this is our opportunity to reach out to you. We are starting these conversations because we want we want to hear from you. We want you to be part of this discussion so that together we can start rethinking that new Cameroon. So really a wonderful opportunity, which I look forward to. And I'm sure we'll be talking again in the next few weeks or so, and just to take this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yves. Thank you, Philbert, and thank you, Jean-Michel. It was really a pleasure having you today. At least we have started the conversation. What was missing was the conversation to start, and we intend to continue. We want it to be a very inclusive conversation. All Cameroonians, even friends of Cameroon who want to participate in bringing the change to Cameroon are more than welcome. And we want to hear from you. What do you think? How can you contribute? You can get in touch. If you want to be part of the conversation, you want to be a panelist, get in touch with us, and we'll be very happy to hear from you. So we'll be having this conversation most Sundays every week where possible, and we'll let you know in advance the topic. Today we have set the priorities. In further conversation, we'll maybe identify specific topics. It can be about political institutions, about education system, about our health system. We will identify critical area where change needs to happen and explore with you how to bring that change for a better Cameroon. Remember, we are having this conversation because we strongly believe that change is possible and that tomorrow we have been waiting for has actually started. So tomorrow has started, and we are going to be part of it. We are going to be the change that Cameroon wants. You also can be that change, and we want to hear from you. Participate in the conversation, participate in the debate. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you, and thank you very much to all panelists of today. We look forward to hearing from you next time. Goodbye.
Ma première sortie politique, si mes compatriotes me font l'honneur de me désigner comme le 3e président de la République du Cameroun, sera de me rendre dans les régions du nord-ouest et du sud-ouest, porteur d'un message de paix, de fraternité à nos frères et sœurs des régions anglophones. Je voudrais les rassurer que non seulement ils sont des Camerounais à part entière, mais ils sont des Camerounais qui comptent. Et que je ne peux pas m'accommoder d'une situation où des Camerounais tirent sur d'autres Camerounais. Je leur dirais que l'État va leur assurer par un effort financier spécial les conditions nécessaires pour reconstruire les villages qui ont été brûlés, reconstruire leurs maisons et surtout pour ceux qui ont perdu leurs affaires, les accompagner dans la reprise d'une activité qui leur permette de gagner décemment leur vie. Une fois que j'aurai remis mes compatriotes des régions anglophones en confiance, je mettrai en place le cadre du dialogue inclusif. Les Camerounais sont suffisamment patriotes. Ils sont suffisamment intelligents pour trouver par eux-mêmes et en eux-mêmes les solutions adéquates à la crise. Et je suis sûr qu'ils s'accorderont sur la forme de l'État qu'il faut pour notre pays. J'ai toujours dit, ce qui importe à la lumière de la crise anglophone, c'est le contenu des attributions ou des pouvoirs que l'on veut transférer aux régions ou, si telle est la décision de la conférence, aux États fédérés qui seront issus de cette conférence. Quel qu'en soit le cas, le résultat de cette conférence sera inscrit dans la Constitution. Et dans le cadre de cette réforme globale de notre Constitution, nous entendons limiter le nombre du mandat présidentiel. Un seul mandat renouvelable une seule fois. De même, nous allons inscrire dans notre Constitution l'élection présidentielle à 2 tours, de façon à nous assurer que toute personne qui sera élue président de la République du Cameroun demain jouisse de toute la légitimité nécessaire et du soutien de la majorité des électeurs camerounais pour conduire les affaires de la nation. De la même façon, nous ramènerons de 20 ans à 18 ans l'âge électoral, car il est incohérent de dire qu'un jeune Camerounais à 18 ans est pénalement responsable, mais qu'à 18 ans, il n'est pas assez mûr pour participer au choix des dirigeants de son pays. À côté de la réforme constitutionnelle, il faudra rétablir l'état de droit. Et je m'y attellerai. Rétablir l'état de droit, c'est d'abord garantir aux Camerounais et à tous ceux qui vivent et travaillent au Cameroun la sécurité judiciaire. Il faudra aussi renforcer l'état de droit par une lutte opiniâtre, sans relâche contre la corruption. Lutte déterminée parce que c'est, je crois, le mal le plus profond qui gangrène et détruit notre société aujourd'hui. C'est pour cela que je m'engage devant les Camerounais à signer, comme tout premier texte, dès que je serai élu, si les Camerounais m'en font l'honneur, le décret d'application de la loi de 2006 sur la déclaration des biens et avoirs. Ce décret fixe le comité devant lequel cette déclaration doit avoir lieu. J'y tiens tout particulièrement parce que je tiens à faire cette déclaration moi-même avant de commencer l'exercice de mes fonctions. Il est important que mes compatriotes sachent quelle est l'étendue de mon patrimoine, de façon à ce que, au moment où j'aurai achevé mon mandat, qu'ils soient en mesure d'apprécier le niveau de mon enrichissement, s'il est conforme et en rapport avec les ressources que l'État mettra à ma disposition ou pas.